This true scary story will surprise you and make you believe that sometimes paranormal stories may be true. For those of you who listen to this scary story to the end, I have prepared a bonus. You will see real photos of these people and creepy events that happened to these people. There are places where even in the age of scientific discovery and skepticism, the belief in witches, curses, and powerful spirits remains strong. In a rural area of Pennsylvania in the early 20th century, this belief influenced the investigation of a brutal murder. Residents of remote farms perceived folklore and superstition as very real phenomena that affect their lives. Perhaps one of the most telling examples is the case of Nelson Reichmeyer. In 1928, a witch named Nellie Knoll convinced a young man, John Blimmer, that Reichmeier had put a curse on him. Blair and his two friends, John Carey and Wilbert Hess, broke into the house of Reichmeier in order to steal his spellbook. They did not find the book, but the owner caught them and the young men killed him. All three were eventually convicted of murder. One of the many oddities of this case is that the three murderers led a law-abiding and quiet life before the crime and continued the same quiet life after their release from prison. It seemed that they really believed in their mission and, having fulfilled it, continued their normal life. But an even stranger incident occurred in the same area in 1934 in Ringtone, Pennsylvania. In this rural area, people were just beginning to get acquainted with the benefits of the 20th century. There was no electricity, plumbing, or telephones. Not far from the city, 63-year-old Susanna lived on a farm with her adopted daughter Tavilla. In 1910, Susan experienced visions and heard voices. At this time, she dreamed that her husband would die on July 5. Mammy was convinced of the reality of what was happening when her husband, who had refused to be persuaded to stay at home, went to his mill that day. He was fatally injured while working. Among people who knew Susan, the tragic event caused not so much sympathy, but fear. People decided that they were faced with another proof of the existence of otherworldly forces. But there were some neighbors who decided that the reason lay in Mammy herself. She's nothing but a witch. Otherwise, how can we explain the deadly accuracy of her prediction? On the evening of March 17, Susan and Tavilla were tending to a local farmer named Jacob Rice. He suffered a serious foot injury at work and, overcoming prejudice, turned to Mammy for help. It is known that witches have the ability to heal. Before going to bed, Mammy went to Rice's room to change the bandage. As she leaned over the man, an explosion sounded in the cottage. The window shattered, and the rush of air into the room extinguished all the candles. The room was plunged into darkness. At that moment, a second sharp sound rang out. It became clear that, as in the first case, it was a shot. Only the second was quieter and less booming. The first time was shot with a shotgun, the second with a pistol. People lay on the floor for a while. In the silence was heard only the sobs of the villa. When at last she dared to get up and light the kerosene lamp, a terrible picture was revealed. Susan Mammy lay on the floor in a pool of blood, shot through the chest. She was dead. Tavilla and Rice sat next to the corpse until morning, and then the girl ran for help. Rice, writhing with pain in his leg, also found the strength to go to the nearest neighbors, who lived a mile from Mammy's house. Police investigators later determined that Susan Mammy was shot with a single bullet in the chest area. They found a shot in the wall. The picture was as follows. The criminal broke the window with a shotgun, and then with a well-aimed shot from a pistol shot Mammy. However, in this case, it should be recognized that the shooter was accompanied by great luck to hit the target in the dark. Having started the investigation, detectives immediately faced an ambiguous reputation of the deceased. It turned out that she led a solitary, isolated life and had many enemies who wanted her dead. In Ringtone, they were told that the old woman jinxed several people and put a curse on others. When news of her death broke, there was a sigh of relief in the city. Despite the many suspects, the investigation soon focused on the identity of a local resident. 3 days after the murder, several boys told detectives about a car parked on the road leading to Susan Mammy's house. The car was empty, but they recognized it. It belonged to 23-year-old Albert Shinsky. Shinsky was polite and confident. A good-natured young man with an exemplary reputation. He was loved by everyone who knew him. A native and respected in the community of the family, Shinsky met with a charming girl Selina Burstel, that he was waiting and was going to marry him. It was hard to imagine that Shinsky could have killed a defenseless elderly woman. However, during the first interrogation he stated, "Yes, I killed Susan Mammy." Life of Albert Shinsky developed remarkably until the age of 17. But then it changed. Gradually, the energetic young man turned into a listless and haggard man. He had lost his attention and concentration in his work, had become a shell of himself, had lost his inner core, and could not explain why. Unable to engage in work that required physical or mental effort, Shinsky spun the wheel, delivering workers to the local mine. When questioned, he told me that some time ago, before trucking, he had worked for a farmer who had fought long and hard with Susan Mammy. They were suing for a piece of land that they both claimed. Once, when Shinsky passed by the field of Mammy, he saw a strange picture. The woman stood in the middle of the field and stared at him. At that moment, Albert felt as if steel fingers were squeezing his throat. From that day on, he began to experience physical and mental torment, which undermined his health. Shinsky colorfully and emotionally described how he regularly felt someone's hands on his own shoulders or throat. And he knew whose hands they were, or by whose evil will they were biting into his body. Then it only got worse. Shinsky began to hear voices that finally convinced him of Susan Mammy's guilt. They didn't come out of nowhere. Shinsky communicated with a black cat that visited him one night and never left him again. Shinsky went to doctors and priests, but no one could help him. And what could they do against the power of the devil? Albert thought so. He went to other local healers and healers who used non-traditional methods. They gave him some potions, amulets, and tinctures, but they were powerless. The cat always came back. Finally, she told Albert that he should kill Susan Mammy. This is the only way to get rid of the curse. On the eve of March 17, Shinsky borrowed a shotgun, loaded it with a magic bullet that is guaranteed to kill a witch, and made his way to Mammy's farm. Albert cheerfully told investigators that immediately after the murder, he felt like a different person. "My life force is back." Albert had no regrets, radiating joy and relief. Shinsky's girlfriend, Selina Bernstal, confirmed most of her fiancé's story. She had no doubt that he was bewitched. Selina believed that she had an idea of what she was talking about, since in the past her cousin was also visited by the ghost of an old woman. Bernstal felt maternal feelings for Albert, felt sorry for him, and described him as a little puppy and a lost soul. She herself was influenced by Shinsky's condition. She told how sometimes, waking up in the morning, she saw Albert kneeling in front of the bed and writhing in pain. When Selina asked Albert about the wedding, he refused, saying that the witch would not allow him to marry. Although Bernstal did not know that Shinsky was preparing to commit a murder, she noted that after Susan's death, Albert changed in the blink of an eye. He felt free from the curse. After the arrest, Albert Shinsky became something like a local hero. Other people came to the police who claimed that Susan Mammy had cursed them too, but now they were transformed, getting rid of her charms. In gratitude for the deliverance from the witch, the townspeople even created a fund in support of the accused of Shinsky's murder. The killer himself remained in high spirits, and even the prospect of sitting on an electric chair did not scare him. "I don't care. I am in the world," he said with a smile. Selina said she was ready to marry Albert immediately, despite the fact that he was sitting in a prison cell. But Shinsky again refused, however, for another reason. He said he did not want such a gloomy wedding. Apparently, he clearly expected that he would be released. The absolutely obvious line of defense at the trial was the proof of the insanity of the accused. Lawyers insisted on insanity, but Shinsky himself seemed rational and calm. Moreover, he vehemently rejected the assumption of his own mental ill health and indignantly rejected such fabrications. But still the psychiatrists decided differently. They concluded that Albert Shinsky suffers from early dementia, one of the manifestations of which is paranoid delirium. Psychiatrists have recommended that the defendant be sent to Fairview State Psychiatric Hospital for compulsory treatment. The judge agreed with this decision and sentenced him accordingly. Shinsky was kept alive, but unfortunately for him, Fairview had a much worse reputation than any prison. Contemporaries, not embarrassed in the formulations, called him an uncontrolled brothel rather than a medical institution. The guards and employees of the hospital regularly abused patients. There were even cases of murder of patients for which no one was punished. There were rumors about Fairview that secret cemeteries were located around the clinic building, on which buried patients were buried. In this hospital, you could disappear forever, whether you were alive or dead. Such a fate awaited Albert Shinsky if he had not been remembered in 1968. By this time he had spent 34 years in a psychiatric hospital. Lawyer William J. Krentsovich became interested in Shinsky's case and set out to seek a review of his case. Albert himself was ready for revision, even if it meant recognition of his saying. "I was a young, stupid, superstitious young man when I committed the murder. I have already been punished enough for this crime." But that was not the end. Albert Shinsky was to remain in custody for another 8 years, until 1976, when a new trial took place. The judge ruled that Shinsky is competent to stand trial. However, the process did not take place. The authorities decided that Albert, in fact, had suffered enough penalties and he was simply released from the hospital. It is known that Albert, who spent a total of 42 years in prison, returned to his native Ringtone, where he lived the rest of his life. The adopted daughter of the murdered witch Tawville lived until 1963. The bride of Albert, Celia, married 4 years after his arrest and subsequently lived with her husband in another city in Pennsylvania. Albert Shinsky himself died in 1983 at the age of 72. They say that ghosts and voices no longer haunted him. Subscribe to my channel and you will hear and see many more true horror stories.